Gaming is an expensive hobby. Consoles are pricey, systems have online subscriptions, and unless you're willing to blast through titles quickly and then trade them in, buying multiple games at once isn't ideal. And that's not to mention that everything these days is a live service that demands you log in every day like you're doing a 9-hour shift. It's like, why have you got your high-vis jacket on today, Josh? You're not at work. And I'm like, I might as well be, man, because my daily orders in Destiny feel like a damn job. Sorry, needed to get that off my chest. Anyway, this means that sometimes great games can be overlooked simply by virtue of their release date. At full price, no one's going to buy 3 or 4 games at once. You pick your favorite, you go home, and then you play it. At least generally speaking. Consequently, if these games had picked a better launch window, it stands to reason they would have sold better and become a much bigger deal than they were. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video games released at the wrong time. Number 10, Resonance of Fate. Resonance of Fate is a good if slightly niche JRPG which released just 1 week after Final Fantasy XIII and so struggled to get any traction. It didn't help that the game was a slow burn either, built for grinding above all else. Though the title was massively engrossing once it got going, it didn't smack you in the face immediately, and in order to dethrone Final Fantasy, you have to hit the ground running, and this just didn't cut it. Having been developed with a Western tilt, heavy steampunk imagery, gunplay inspired by the Matrix, its approach to battles is more typically Japanese. Final Fantasy XIII, on the other hand, has a more Western, in-at-the-deep-end, in-media-res style, yet a more Japanese aesthetic. Resonance of Fate did manage to cling on to life, even getting a recent remaster, but you have to feel that without Final Fantasy launching so soon before, it would have excelled even more. Number 9, Shadow Hearts. JRPGs really need to stop going head-to-head with Final Fantasy. Following on from Resonance of Fate, Shadow Hearts is another pretty decent game, which was all but annihilated under the supreme firepower of Final Fantasy. It did have one advantage though. The installment it was competing with, X, is generally thought of as one of the series' lesser lights. In a just world then, those players seeking compelling battle mechanics, developed casts, and a well-told story would have bought Shadow Hearts. Conversely, those seeking a core RPG experience with complex level-up systems and an in-depth inventory would have bought Final Fantasy X. Of course, players who wanted all of that probably should have just stuck to playing Final Fantasy VII again anyway. In any case, it's not a just world most of the time, and even though Shadow Hearts trounced the competition in some key areas, the name brand won out and a subpar Final Fantasy ultimately won the day. Number 8, Sin. Sin is, in another timeline, the definitive first-person shooter from which all 21st century shooters would be built off. Unfortunately for Sin though, in this timeline it came out the same month as Half-Life, which itself provided the building blocks for pretty much all shooters after. Both Sin and Half-Life introduced some new ideas to the genre, but Half-Life was much slicker. In comparison, Sin's innovations were more along the lines of, oh yeah, that's new, and Half-Life's, were actually fun to play. Sin is comparable in that regard to Ang Lee's recent Gemini Man. That movie was shot in 120 frames per second and is one of the only features to boast that format, but, well, you didn't run to see Gemini Man, did you? I know for a fact that you didn't, because it made about a $5 at the box office, so don't you try to lie to me. What I'm saying is this was in the same vein of, oh, you can knock a gun out of an enemy's hand, but that's hardly a selling point if you have nothing around it. 120 frames per second might work, but if the movie it's supporting isn't good, then, what's it really for? The same goes here, but for the aforementioned shooting guns out of hands and general limb damage. Mainly though, as it was hurried out to beat Half-Life on shelves, Sin was weighed down by exceedingly long load times and game-breaking bugs, which is a shame because, like I said, it pioneered so many great ideas. Number 7, Shantae. Shantae, you stay on the bloody shelf because your system's dying. Zing. Yeah. Good. Now there's plenty of people who'll rag on Shantae. It's more than a bit camp with its ponytail attacks, and playing it you can never quite decide if it's a throwback homage or just a little bit dated. However, it is a great game that just about survived a bafflingly bad release date. Capcom decided to delay the game for 8 months in 2002, which was an issue because it was only available on the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Advance had just released. Seemingly, nobody told Capcom that time is linear, and lo and behold, when the title eventually released, the color was dying and all anyone cared about was the games on the Advance. Now the Advance was backwards compatible, so Shantae could have been played on it, but 8 months in, most people wanted new, improved Advance games. Shantae then was left on the shelves and didn't recover until 10 years later when the sequel eventually came out. Number 6. Wrecking Crew. Most of the games here had poor release windows, either because of steep competition or because their systems were failing. For the middle of the list though, 1985's Wrecking Crew offers a bit of a change-up. There's nothing especially wrong with the release window for Wrecking Crew, except that it's about 25 years too early. The concept was massively ahead of its time, and while the graphics obviously don't hold up now, the idea still does. Wrecking Crew was Super Mario Maker decades before the idea was revived. Mario and Luigi were actually the titular Wrecking Crew as well back in '85, so the concept has been in Mario's wheelhouse for a while now. Several games have level building these days, and with the success of world building games like Minecraft added in there, level design knowledge amongst amateurs is really at an all-time high. Wrecking Crew though remains one of Mario's least loved releases. A little too fiddly, a little too restricted by its era, and the game died without a whimper. Shocking if you ask me. Number 5. EverQuest II. EverQuest II, similar to Sin, offered a lot of innovations to its genre, and in another lifetime might have gone on to become the definitive offering. Where Sin was stomped on by Half-Life though, EverQuest was met with the iron fist of World of Warcraft. EverQuest II came out shortly before Blizzard changed the landscape of the genre entirely with Warcraft, but EverQuest did bring some important new features to the table. It had voice actors well before when this was the norm, even getting Heather Graham and Christopher Lee in the cast. Like, that ain't bad. Also, while it boasted best in the business graphics, the scale of the game was so huge that unless you had an absolutely beastly PC, you probably weren't going to see or appreciate them. And unfortunately, a lot of the changes and tweaks from the first installment were very divisive as well. They made the game easier to get into, but also a little less rewarding overall, stripping away some of the challenge. It's possible these alterations would have been met more positively without World of Warcraft to compare it to, but it's equally likely that it would have simply fizzled out on its own. Still, we can never know because it got the release date it got, and that completely tanked it. Number 4. Mad Max. This one is just dumb. Games based off movies are rarely good ideas, although occasionally they can surprise you. For instance, Pixar's Brave game has way more to it than you'd expect, for example, and I'm being deadly serious there. It's good. It's really good. I might play it right now, after this video. Mad Max, though, is perhaps the biggest example. This tie-in blended the core themes of the movie with tight-as-hell gameplay, visceral melee combat, and genuinely excellent car combat. Sadly, coming out 4 months after Mad Max Fury Road blew a lot of that potential right off the bat. When it did release, it was seen as being too late to be a tie-in, but too close to feel like its own product. Even though the game had been planned regardless of how successful Mad Max Fury Road was, the lateness made it feel like a bit of a lazy cash-in. What put it 6 feet under the sand though was a little game called Metal Gear Solid 5, which came out, and I need to stress this, the same day. The exact same day. And look, I have no business degree. I am a really dumb person. And even I could have told every single publisher, that was a dumb idea. You really messed that up. Shame on you. Slap your little wrist. Bad. Number 3, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Plenty of games here have gone toe-to-toe with other major releases and suffered for it, but Vampire the Masquerade seemed to make that their entire mission. Hell, it was almost like the devs had agreed to a dare and then didn't want to back down from it. The game originally set a target of releasing between Half-Life 2's announcement and eventual release, and that was an admirable plan, with the devs trying to give themselves a comfortable distance either side of that 18-month window. However, delays took it much closer to Half-Life 2 than they would have liked, and it was laughably buggy when they shoved it out the door as well. The problem was, it wasn't just joined at launch by Half-Life 2. Metal Gear Solid 3 and Halo 2 both came out in the same month, meaning that November 2004 had 3 of the most popular games of all time, and then Vampire the Masquerade's Bloodlines. Save for bugs, which arguably would be much less of a factor with a hypothetical ideal release date, Vampire was a great game that had ambitions ahead of its time. It's a shame that it missed out on the spotlight back then, but here's hoping the third game hits it out the park. Number 2, Titanfall 2. Though it has to settle for the second spot here, Titanfall 2 is renowned for having an absolutely atrocious release window, being sent out to die between Battlefield 1 and Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. It's so notorious that it's not even really fair to call it a hidden gem game anymore, with the pendulum swinging the other way. Those who play the game at release have lauded it so much that its quality is well known, even if sales figures and the player base, you know, the things publishers tend to care about the most, didn't rival the two giants that released either side of it. The praise isn't for nothing though. The game is one of the best first-person shooters of the last decade, and thanks to a recent stint on PlayStation Plus, actually has an active player base once again. As for the story mode, it's also way better than it has any right to be in terms of invention, level design, and just sheer fun. That time travel level especially is just mwah, chef's kiss. These days, Titanfall actually gets the recognition it deserves, but that's despite its release window, not because of it. Number 1, Battleborn. The only reason Titanfall 2 is often held up as the quintessential released at the wrong time video game is because everyone forgot about Battleborn almost instantly. It doesn't even have a notorious crash and burn reputation like Anthem, which literally crashed and burned PS4s. Battleborn just sank, forgotten as quickly as it arrived, and its release date was a massive factor in all of that. It released in May 2016, the same month as Overwatch, the end. What, you actually want an explanation? Alright then. Both were hero shooters built on a variety of mechanics to switch between, different characters with various backstories but no overarching narrative, and a vibrant, colourful palette. However, where Battleborn was average, Overwatch excelled. Battleborn might have survived at a different time, but choosing to compete, even if it did nick out the gates faster, was just a boneheaded move that got it instantly killed. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you think these games would have exceeded had they come at a different time, or were they always doomed from conception to release? Either way, while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't, though, I've been Josh. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.